Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know now, because we're concluding our 34th year with this program, I interview writers about their craft, what they're working on, what they've done in the past, what they're planning for the future. We also have on occasionally other brands of artists. We have had on musicians, sculptors, painters. So if you have an idea for a writer, or perhaps another variety of artists who might be a good fit for the Writer's Block, watch for our address at the end of the show. I also want to remind you that the Writer's Block and all the other original programming coming out of 1623 Studios is a result of cable access television. It's a wonderful community asset, and you don't get it with other ways of approaching television and the internet. So stick with cable, stick with the Writer's Block. I'm very happy today to say we do have a poet, a writer by the name of Bradford Chase. He is originally from Cape Cod, but he's worked in Gloucester and he's written poems about Gloucester. And I'm going to read for his introduction the paragraph about him on the back cover of his new poetry book, Cod Bones. Brad Chase is a 13th generation Cape Codder who grew up in Harwich between a swamp and a herring run. Trained as a fish biologist, he went to sea 3 years on foreign fishing boats, then built a career in laboratories in the ports of Narragansett, Salem, Gloucester, and New Bedford. Cod Bones is his first poetry collection, a far cry from the dry forum of scientific reporting. Within Cod Bones, he explores his love of the ocean, unrequited love, love lost and found, and love for family, all mingling with that lingering presence, all mingling with that lingering preoccupation with the dark side. Welcome to the Writer's Block, Brad.
Thank you, John. Pleasure to be here.
I want to also mention that to our audience that you explore Gloucester in a number of your poems.
Yes.
Where are you from? Well, the audience knows where you're from. Where did you go to school on the Cape? And then where did you continue to go to school?
So I grew up in Harwich on Cape Cod, graduated from high school there, went to UMass Amherst and studied for fish biology. Graduated from UMass Amherst and then worked for a few years. My first job out at UMass was working here in Gloucester tuna fishing in the summer of 1983. Then I eventually went back to graduate school, University of Rhode Island, and got a degree in marine fisheries management.
So you started, your first actual fishing job was here in Gloucester.
Yeah. Well, one summer, living at Camp Annisquam and going on tuna boats almost every day that I could. So that was a good introduction to the industry and to Gloucester.
So you had not fished either pleasure fishing or as a business in Cape Cod? Cape Cod.
Fish for pleasure, fish growing up endlessly. Love fishing, but fishing, big game, commercial style for bluefin tuna, that was a whole different fishery.
And then you, for other reasons connected with the fisheries, you moved up here for periods of time.
Yeah, I got a job with the National Marine Fisheries Service in Narragansett, Rhode Island, working at that laboratory after being at sea for 3 years on foreign fishing boats. So I worked with a federal agency for about 5 years. Then I got hired by the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries to work at the Salem laboratory. And after 10 years there, I moved up to the Gloucester laboratory of the Division of Marine Fisheries. And then eventually, after 10 years, moved down to New Bedford, to that laboratory.
So you told me before the show, this is the lab off Centennial, right on the Annisquam.
Right, the Annisquam River, yeah, right there.
So you lived in Gloucester for a considerable amount of time.
Yeah, 10 years living here with my family, and then 2 summers before that living at the Camp Annisquam. So I had 2 ventures there, and that should produce some stories in itself, just staying there for a summer. And then 10 years living mainly on Perkins Street on Portuguese Hill. So really a great experience.
So you have wide experience in Gloucester.
Oh, just a wonderful time. Great city.
I noticed at the bottom of all your poems, you include the location, whether a ship at sea or a city, Gloucester, where the poem was conceived. Place is important to you.
I thought so. The publisher thought about it. He wasn't sure if he liked it at first, but I felt like when I wrote poems on boats, I wanted to put the boat name and where I was. And so that carried over to the other places. And so all the poems do have that listing. It's good for me to think back to that site. I think it's interesting for the reader to think about the poems written at sea.
Yeah, and I like the ones, the first person ones, when you're at sea.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us something about those first years at sea?
So I got hired as an observer, and this is, a position run by the National Marine Fisheries Service to put people out on these ships. These were all foreign ships back then. They were allowed to come into our federal waters to fish for fish that we let them fish. And so I was taking biological samples, but we also had an enforcement component back then. We monitored what they caught. So you'd show up on this boat, and you weren't always very welcome. And my first trip in the Bering Sea was a 60-day deployment, 61 days actually, on a Japanese boat that hadn't had an observer before. So
they had not ever had an observer.
So they were really keen on just tricking me and just carrying on business as usual. So every day was a struggle to get them to report what they were catching and to find out what they were catching and to collect biological samples. So it was really an adventurous job to have. I got exposed to all these fisheries, all these different cultures, and I had time on my hands, when storms came up, to do some writing. So I started doing some writing. That was really the beginning of a lot of the writing I did on those ships.
On the ships.
Yeah.
You have a couple poems in here on that written on that Japanese vessel. Can you read one of them for us?
You want me to?
Sure, I'd love to hear it.
Which one do you want to hear?
Well, there's one about, there's one involving a cocktail.
Oh, Suntory?
Yes.
Okay.
Or it's up to you. I don't want you to do anything that's uncomfortable.
No, that's fine. There's one about a hurricane, and there's one in the Bering Sea. What do you feel like you'd like to hear?
Well, how about the Bering Sea? That sounds
Sure.
rough and ready to me.
Okay, so
what page is this?
This is on page 7. The name of the boat was Kumano Maru, and it was a bottom trawler fishing for Pacific cod and different flounder species. I was on the boat for 61 days.
61 days. How big a ship is this?
It was probably like 150 feet. They transferred me at sea to another boat, and that was one of the hairiest things because it was a pretty rough conditions. They would tell me to jump, and I was like, I'll damn well jump when I'm ready. And so we had this big argument going on. Finally, I jumped over the other boat. But it was pretty amazing deployment. So let me start. This is called Suntory. I don't think I've ever read this one before, so I'm going to just give it a try and see how it goes.
I'm looking forward to it.
5,000 miles from my home, whiskey glass within my reach. Can't call nobody on the telephone, can't meet my friend at the beach. What about love on this ocean? Is it hidden as a clam holds a pearl? Maybe whiskey is the right potion. That guy says he'll be my girl. Up from misery, down to shame with the waves my emotions roll. I substitute work for this pain, my blues are under control. As the sun falls from the sky, I swear the water seems black. Without this tear in my eye, it's really the darkest of blue. So give me that glass of Suntory. Maybe time won't pass by so slow. I'll tell you a made-up story, seeing there ain't no place to go. When there's no love to be gained, there's no reason for love lost. It's best to set my mind out for a stroll. I'll think better of lonely oceans crossed. My blues are under control.
Very nice. Very nice. And as I mentioned, the place name is always at the bottom of the poem. This is fishing vessel Kumano Maru, Bering Sea.
Bering Sea.
Bering Sea is not. It's a rough and ready description. Bering Sea. I think of darkness and big waves.
It was
not sandy beaches.
It was out there. We had once a storm came up, and it was too far to run to shore back to Alaska. We were close to Russia at that point, so we just rode the storm out for 3 days. It was so rough, so windy. It was impossible to do anything else but just point the boat right into the waves and ride it out for 3 days. You couldn't sleep. It was just impossible to sleep because it was so rough. And so everybody was pretty miserable, but that's what you had to go through.
And you have to go into the waves all the time.
The whole time.
You can't be a beam.
If you lost power, it would have been all over.
Yeah.
You had to just keep going right into the waves.
Yeah.
You could never go a beam to the waves.
Yeah.
So that's something they don't prepare you for in observer school.
It sounds scary. Pretty scary. Did the administration give you a 10-minute course in Japanese before going on?
They encouraged us to learn a few words, and but that was it. That the first boat I went on, nobody spoke English, and I knew a handful of Japanese words.
Was that the Kumano Maru?
Kumano Maru, yeah. And so
61 days.
Well, they transferred me to a second boat after 30, but 61 days out at sea on two boats. The first boat was a Kumano Maru. And so that was quite an experience. I got off with some money in my pocket and flew to Anchorage, Alaska, and then flew to Seattle and said, let's get back out there. I couldn't wait.
Yeah?
It was a great experience.
Yeah. Helps to be in your 20s, too.
I think so, yeah.
I'm interested also in your background, which is scientific, your academic background, scientific. When did writing first occur to you as an outlet? Was it a second grade teacher or somebody you met in school, or how did that come about?
I think that when I was on these ships, I brought a lot of books, and I read a lot, and I focused on the classic, and I dove into guys like James Joyce and just really was impressed by the lyrical nature of their writing. And I think I started saying, okay, I've got time on my hands on these boats. I'm going to start to try something. And poetry was a forum where you could just give it a shot and see where it goes. So it began about then, and maybe a little before there in high school, but none of those poems have survived. I don't know whatever happened to them. The ones I have began with the ships, and then it carried on from there. And I developed an interest to just try different styles and continue to write when I could.
Yeah. Well, it's good that survived through high school, because I know for boys and men growing up, the arts are kind of forbidden. They're frowned on, it's not manly, that kind of stuff.
I kept it under my hat for a long time. It wasn't something that I really just, I just wrote because I felt like it, and I never really put it out there. I never really was part of any community to share poems. It's just something I did for years and just kind of tucked them in a box.
Yeah.
And no idea really what would happen with them.
I used to mention to my students occasionally that James Dickey, the Georgia poet, played football for a while for Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
And, oh, really? Yeah, is that true? Oh. I like that idea that you've crossed over from the scientific world, which is important to you, as you devoted your career to it, to art. Is that difficult to go back and forth, and does one world inform the other?
That's a great question, and they're so different. To me, technical writing is something I do. I've published some research in scientific journals. It doesn't come easy for me. It's very difficult, and I think for many scientists, it's not an easy thing to do. And so, whereas the poems at times just come, and I just start writing. So it's a very different style of writing. One is very inspired. The other one depends on hard work and processing all this data and putting it all together, and then grinding out a written report based on work that came before you. And so very different styles. I don't think I've ever gotten very comfortable with technical writing, although I enjoy the results. I enjoy contributing to the process. Yeah. This is probably more rewarding because you're just taking a shot and seeing what happens, and some come out and you think they might be okay. Yeah. And so it's a very different process. I'm happy I've had a chance to play with both.
When you write, do you write at certain times if your schedule allows it, or do you just do it whenever you can grab an hour?
I think with the technical writing, it's the mornings when I'm somewhat fresh. And then with the poetry, I really just wait for something, kind of to inspire me. It's really hard for me to sit down and say, I'm going to write a poem right now. Right. It doesn't really go that way. It's really something comes up, and then I just go for it. And it could be any time of the day or night. And it's really just having that inspiration to kick me into spending time on it. And of course, there's big chunks of your lives when you're bringing up kids and you're doing different things where you just can't put time to it.
Life gets in the way.
Yeah. I've often wondered if I didn't have this career as a fish biologist, would I have spent more time on this? And maybe I would have. But, you can't second guess that.
We had another guest not too long ago who was, his career was in medicine. He's a doctor. And he was back and forth whether he would write or not, or go continue in med school. And he continues in med school. Pays more bills. I noticed I want to talk technically about some of these poems. You use form, but not a lot of traditional form, no sonnets in here. But right. You use form, line length and rhythm, and you use rhyme.
Yes.
When do you decide to do make rhymes and what poems. Sometimes you don't.
Right.
And what governs your, I don't know, your metric consideration, line length or
Yeah.
rhythm or feel?
It's a great question, and I think I go through phases, or I have gone through phases where it's all about rhyming, and then I go through phases where it's more prose, and I'm not trying to rhyme. I think early on I was inspired by some of those great writers and just how lyrical, and they weren't rhyming, but they, James Joyce, they still had a lyrical content, so I tried to achieve that. And so often I would be inspired by a couple, you get a stanza in your head that rhymed, and I'd follow through.
Yeah.
So even now, I think it goes both ways, and I just kind of wait and see what happens. Then very recently, I'm reading poetry, and I'm starting to look at it. For many, many years, I never read these things, and so I had no idea what they sounded like. Now I'm trying to understand what they sound like, and can I edit them to make them sound better? So that's what I've been doing lately, is thinking about how it sounds when you read it.
Yeah, I think the reading of others is really important. I think sometimes when I'm writing myself, I think the most important thing I know is what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And you can only get that from wide reading.
Right, and I missed that. I missed the reading poetry out loud for many, many years. I just never thought of it. I did it in isolation. So I'm getting together now with some folks, and I'm really appreciating hearing other poets, hear how they have style, hear what they do, and then go back to mine and try to learn which ones sound good when you read them out loud. They don't all sound good, but some are good, and then writing new ones, I think I'm going to try to steer the writing to be, spoken aloud.
Yeah, that's technically interesting because I like to get into some technical aspects. I think some people think, oh, it just comes.
Yeah.
Well, no, it doesn't just. Another thing you do that's technically interesting to me is that a number of your poems are in the first person of personas that you've created.
Yes.
And I'm thinking of one of the Gloucester poems, Bemo Ledge.
Yes.
I think, if I remember correctly, that's a captain. Or at least I don't know if he's a captain.
He's a skipper of a small boat.
Skipper of a small boat.
Yeah.
And he's dying, evidently. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil her.
I'll read that one if you want.
Yeah, I would love to hear you read that.
Okay.
That's that's one of my markers in here.
So that's a case of human failing and just poor navigation. And it is fictionalized, but it also is in the first person.
Yeah, it's early, page 4.
Okay.
Bemo Ledge, which is over the Magnolia area of Gloucester, if I remember right.
It's a beautiful area off of Brace Cove, just a wonderful beach.
Oh, it's by near Brace Grove.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
But it is a ledge that at high tide is submerged. And so I had close encounters with my boat at that ledge. I dove on the ledge and realized just how impressive that chunk of granite was. And that resulted in this, people think it's me, but no, I never hit Bemo Ledge. So let me give it a try. I hit Bemo Ledge at 16 knots. I hit old Bemo in the fog. Not too smart, but I ain't dead. Cold water's all around with warm blood on my head. Never saw the breakers before we hit. Running hard in fog for no good reason. Just 2 totes of codfish on board. Now I'm in the rollers and all busted up, trying to keep my body off the ledge. A month from now I'd be done from the chill. If I keep moving, I have a chance. I can't see a thing. I can hear the surf at Brace Cove. Tell me where I need to go. I remember when Stevie hit Salvages with his dragger one December night. Those boys were asleep in their bunks as the northeast wind blew and the ocean rushed in. It's the captain that plots the course, and it's the crew that takes it on the chin. No bigger fool for what I did, hands on the wheel pushing through fog. But a lucky fool can stay alive, not much else for me to do. My wife left me 2 years before, and my boys won't see me now. The Sheila B meant everything to me. Now she belongs to Bemo Ledge. I hit Bemo Ledge at 16 knots. I hit old Bemo in the fog. Not too smart, but I ain't dead. I hit Bemo Ledge at 16 knots. Some set a course in life, but never follow. Some set the wrong course, but never know. I've been 10 degrees off my whole life, running that line hard into these rocks. I hit Bemo Ledge at 16 knots. I hit old Bemo in the fog. Not too smart, but I ain't dead. I hit old Bemo Ledge at 16 knots.
I love that repetition. I hit Bemo Ledge at 16 knots, and not too smart, but I ain't dead. At Bemo Ledge, you corrected me on the location. And as you say, that ledge is not visible at high tide.
No, it's really kind of treacherous, and I think a lot of boaters have had close calls over the years. I went out there diving once when a boat sunk out there to try to salvage some of the gear that was on the boat. And I got to see, scuba diving, just how treacherous that is.
Oh, you scuba dive too?
Yeah. Bape Ann.
Cape Ann.
There's no better place.
There's a rock in Magnolia Beach that's invisible at high tide.
Yeah.
And if you don't know it's there, I mean, it's just isolated rock. It's about 7 feet tall
Yeah.
off the sand. And if you don't know it's there and you come in,
Yeah.
of course, you're close. You won't die because you're only about 50 feet from.
Well, this fellow hopefully had a chance to swim to Brace Cove, so maybe there's a good outcome to this story.
Yeah.
Maybe he made it.
Maybe.
Yeah.
We don't know. We won't talk about it.
We'll never know.
Poor guy. There's a couple of nice tricks in here. I love that you have a rhyme. The last word in the fourth stanza is in, and the ocean rushed in, and then a stanza break, and that is followed by a rhyme in the second line of the next stanza. It's the captain that plots the course, and it's the crew that takes it on their chin. I love that rhyme that skips stanza because it holds the thing together,
Right.
and it's really good. And the repetition in this is really strong. You use both the skills for line length and rhythm and the variety in rhyming very well in this. I like it.
Thank you very much. This is one of the more recent ones that I tried to think about, okay, how's this going to sound? And I was looking for endings of every line that would have a nice hard edge and maybe connect with some of the other ones. So that's where I was in the closet for years just writing for myself. This was one I was thinking about, okay, how's it going to sound when I read it?
I want to emphasize, because we're recording in Gloucester, a couple other Gloucester poems. There's a number of them, and you have, I think they're only outnumbered maybe by Salem and Harwich, but I can understand the Harwich emphasis. Being a 16th generation?
13th.
13th generation. So that means the original ancestor settled in Cape Cod when? 17?
The first one came to Dorchester in 1630, but he moved to the Cape in 1640. And so that was the first.
So just about the time, slightly after Gloucester was founded.
Yes.
Your ancestors were on Cape Cod.
Yeah, similar time. Yeah.
There's a poem in here, Gloucester, Massachusetts, called Red Dress. I enjoyed that poem. Could you read that for us and maybe explain if that's completely
what page is it on?
Poetic imagination, or whether it's based on an experience? 78.
Well, John, I'm going to read it for you because you asked me to. I've never read this, and I'm not sure my wife took a big shine to this one.
Well, I'm sure she has a nice red dress.
Yes, she does. There you go. Geez, I knew I should have talked to you before. Yeah, so this is a setting in a bar in Gloucester. There's a band playing, and it just goes back to, Gloucester's always had a great nightlife, just good music, good appreciation for music.
Yeah.
Still does. Always enjoyed those times. So, all right, this is gonna be fun. Red Dress. She's good business when the band's in town. Single guys drink faster and always stick around. She's a conductor of the blues. Other women do the best they can, keeping one eye on her and the other on her man. Red dress, she's got a red dress on. A virtuoso of motion, she works the beat real slow. Hands on her waist, knees bent, slowly rocking as the clock ticks 6 times. When the bass line swings, her heels come together as she dips to the floor. It's the kind of move the whole room sees. It's the kind of move that makes a grown man believe all the wonders of nature, that pulls tides through the seas, that pushes wind through the trees, that brings prophets to their knees, grow cold in the shadow of her back step sway. Red dress, she's got a red dress on. When the chorus lead rips, her shoulders move side to side. One red strap slips as her arms go up high. Her red leg steps back, the other starts to slide. Your skull is going to crack when her hips join the ride. What are you going to do tomorrow? Think about her red dress. Red dress, everybody knows she's got a red dress on.
Gloucester, Massachusetts. Now, is this something you witnessed, or is this? Or can you maybe have to take the Fifth Amendment here?
I think it's all part of my experience going out in Gloucester over the years, and it's absolutely a Gloucester bar, some great band playing to a local crowd, and people are just dancing and having fun. So it's a great Gloucester memory.
It's a nice poem. I like to see these Gloucester poems in here.
Well, thank you. I've never read it, so I wasn't sure even how to read that one.
Well, I'm glad we could have a first here on the air. I want to read, we don't have a lot of time. I wonder if you could do justice to your hometown and read one of the Harwich poems. I'm thinking of Galloway on page 99.
Okay.
Your hometown, which I'm sure you,
Sure.
you're back on the Cape now with your wife.
Yeah.
Are you in Harwich?
We're in Harwich.
You are?
Yep. We live a mile from where I grew up, and we're surrounded by family. And leaving Gloucester was one of the hardest things I ever did because I loved it up here. But we moved to be close to the family, and I think that time has been really well spent. And so,
Good.
Anytime I can come back to Gloucester, it's a treat.
Page 99.
Okay. Okay, so this one, a little bit dark. It's about me losing a first cousin, and really the first close family that I lost, and so
Okay.
Galloway's the name. For every day there are two tides. For every man 10 dogfish die. If one day one goes, I know, I quench the teardrop in my eye. We toasted blood last time we met. I smelt the shroud in your sweat. You booted, you boozed, you were a mess. You were blood, and I let blood rest. I hear the waves bash off this twisted coast. I fall in judgment before my reptile host. I smell the warm, foul breath of the tortoise, mixing in the pre-dawn mist of our Galapagos, shading the moonbeam's path until I'm veiled in black, settling to chill the sweat of my sunburned back. From what depth did the serpent arise? What force moved the dancing samurai? Wild laughter bent to the charm of blow. My soul won't share a reason why. Now, I wish that you were here to explain to me your darkest fear. Would express our love with easy excess and slip from the shroud until another year.
That's a very nice poem. Very nice poem, very strong. And the repetition of shroud in the early part of the poem and then later in the poem is very, very effective.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for reading that. We're
Yeah.
almost out of time.
Wow.
This is a fun half hour. I want to thank you, Brad Chase, for sharing cod bones with us. I know after our show airs, you'll sell thousands, millions of copies. I appreciate you informing us about your work and also your real job work, the fisheries, which is so important to Gloucester, and how the topics joined in this book.
Well, thank you so much for your interest.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. And if folks want me to come to Gloucester and read any time, I'd be game.
I'll spread the word.
Great. Thank you, John.
I want to thank everybody in the TV audience for your participation too. If you've learned something from Brad Chase about fishing, fisheries, and poetry, then the Writer's Block has done its job. I hope to see you again next year on the Writer's Block. Good night.